So everyone talks about downsizing like it's this magical fresh start. So you have fewer things, fewer problems, simpler life. And part of that's true, but nobody tells you about the grief and the guilt of letting go of your kids' things, the fights that it starts with your spouse, the moment you realize you've been hiding behind your stuff for decades. This is what downsizing actually feels like and why it's still worth it. And I'm going to get into it. I'm starting here because somebody, they just sent me a message that lives inside every word of what I just said. And I've watched my clients go through it. Look, Anne, she wrote in with this, and I'm going to read it here. Weldon, I'm 62, my husband's 64, and we're rattling around 4,200 square feet that we haven't needed in more than a decade. We've been about to downsize for 4 years. Every January, we say this is the year. Every December, we haven't done a thing. I've read 3 books. I follow a couple of downsizing channels. I've measured a few townhomes online, even. My husband, though, he keeps saying that we should just rip the Band Aid. I keep saying that we need to be smart about it. The truth is, I'm scared. I'm scared of the grief that I can already feel coming. I'm scared that we'll regret it. How do we actually pull the trigger and not look back? Thank you for sending that question in. And as you're watching this video right now, I want you to take a moment to think about this because almost everyone watching, they have some version of this in their own head right now. And I've been helping people through transitions like this for years. Different square footage, different cities, different ages. It's the same shape, same types of questions each time because it's human nature. And each time I read a letter like this, I'm thinking the same thing. Everything is in this letter except one thing. She tells me how big the house is, how long they've been gone, how many books that she's read on this subject, what her husband says, what she says. There's one thing that she doesn't tell me, though, and it's the thing that explains the 4-year loop that we just heard, that they've been going through year after year. She doesn't tell me what smart actually looks like to her, and there's different terminologies for it, but in this case, she used the word smart. If she goes through with this downsize, what does that home, what does that lifestyle look like for you on the other side? What does Tuesday morning, how is that supposed to feel a year from now after you choose to go through this process? Because it's a lot. What I'm suggesting here is to have a vision for what you're looking for. If you have not defined what success looks like on the other side, it is a tall mountain to climb, and you're going to be questioning yourself, why am I doing this? She knows what she's moving away from. She doesn't know what she's moving towards. And without that picture, every tactic, every checklist, that just becomes annoyance and frustration and a moment of feeling overwhelmed. You're letting go of things without knowing what you're making room for. That's not downsizing. That is loss with a moving truck attached to it. So here's the show, what we're going to go through today. 7 ugly truths that nobody's ever going to say out loud. And everyone traces back to that missing piece. And if you fix that, every other ugly truth, that gets dramatically less ugly. And by the way, this is why it's still worth it. The alternative is doing this twice, or doing it angry, or never doing it at all. So let's get into it and let's learn. And here's point 1. You will grieve. And grief without a destination is just loss. Remember, going back to that vision statement, you have to have that vision of the why, where you're going. That way, that's what gets you through the tough times. And anyone who tells you that downsizing is light and breezy and freeing either hasn't done it at all, or is lying, or is 42 years old with no kids whatsoever, and they're living in a studio apartment. The minute you start touching things that have been on a shelf for 15 years, something cracks. I watched my mom go through this. So she cried over a coffee mug, not the photo album, but the coffee mug. And it had to do with her deceased husband. He had used it for something and it meant something. It had a memory attached to it. In that moment, we were going through and sorting things into the donate pile. And the part that nobody says out loud is grief by itself, that is just loss, pure loss with no upside. But that same coffee mug, That feels different when she can picture exactly where she's drinking her coffee in the future, a year from now, and she knows the version of her sitting there that she doesn't need that other mug to remember him. His memory sits within her. The grief doesn't go away. I'm not saying that by any stretch. The memory is not tied up in the stuff, it's inside you. You purposely choose to keep living to find that joy. I'm not saying it's easy to part with the stuff, but it's part of the process. And there's other ways where you can part with it and still internalize what that meant. Take a picture of it. And you might be wondering, well, then what in the world do you know? You're not old enough to be downsizing. You're right. I have done my own downsize here in Colorado Springs. We went to a smaller home. My daughter's about to be out of school and moving on to college. And so we chose to make things a little easier for us now. We still had to go through the mental process of this, and I go through it with my clients. So I'm not, again, saying it's easy. It's not, but it's reframing the way we think about things. As you're watching this, you might be feeling overwhelmed. This sometimes brings up feelings of why? What am I doing? How do I do it? Well, that's exactly what we do. Life transitions, they fall apart without a plan or the right professionals. And when they're not in your corner, you have the wrong folks, it's tough. So, what we did is we built a free decision tool to help you organize your thoughts. Or if it helps more, you can book time directly on my calendar. We guide folks through transitions every single day. And it helps you clarify your next steps, your life goals, your finances, and your real estate if that's even involved. The link, it's in the description below. And if you haven't already, subscribe. We push out more life, wealth, and real estate content every week for people's transitions. And these are transitions that we all go through in order to be helpful. Okay, moving on to point number two. This is your spouse is reading from a different ugly truth. What in the world am I talking about? So, your spouse here, they're not actually disagreeing with you about downsizing. You are arguing about two completely different futures, and you both think you're arguing about the same one. So, I want to go back to that letter. The husband says, rip the band aid. The wife says, let's be smart. They think that they're talking about timing. My experience says that they're not. They're actually talking about two different versions of the next chapter, and neither has said it out loud. And I've seen it go badly more times than I can count. One partner picturing a low maintenance condo near the grandkids, and the other one's picturing a smaller acreage property that they can finally have a workshop with. Each are planning for a different vision. And so that impacts what you're doing right now with your stuff. And it puts you in some precarious positions where you're having arguments and you're like, what in the world are we arguing about? And why? These folks, they're married for 40 years and now they're standing in a garage at 8 p.m. at night on a Tuesday, losing their minds at each other for a spray paint or a paint sprayer. The paint sprayer is not the problem. The problem is smart means two different things in the same household, and nobody has laid out the vision that they're working towards. Now let's move on to point number three. And this is that your kids did not ask for any of this. And that cuts in two directions. First, you cannot keep their stuff for them anymore. The box of trophies in your basement, it's not for them. It's for you. They have a life of their own. They have their own basement. The kindest thing that you can do is invite them to take what they want. Give them a deadline and let go of the rest with a clear conscience. Their childhood is not stored in a Rubbermaid bin. It's stored in them, in their heart. Now, number two, this one's harder. They are watching how you do this. If you white knuckle this, if you wait until you have to move, if you leave them with a 4,200 square foot decision tree to solve in 3 weekends after your funeral, they will remember that. And they will do the same thing when their turn comes. And I'm not saying remember it negatively as though it's some poor reflection on you. What you are doing is you are demonstrating a pattern. You are leading from the front. Whatever pattern you set, that's what you're handing them. Define what you actually want to lead them in their mind and take action to do it. Not just the dollars, but the pattern. Okay, we are 4 truths from the end. Stay with me. Truth number 4, this next one, it's the one that nobody on YouTube is gonna say out loud. And it's where we always hear downsizing go. Less stuff. So, less stuff is not a method. It is not a destination. And the entire downsizing industry is built on selling you the method without ever making you write down the destination. Are you seeing a theme here? Because this comes up in most of the points today, but it is the key to success. Less stuff is what you do. A simpler life is what you say, and neither one is what you actually want. What you actually want is something layered, it's nuanced under both of those. More time with people, less Sunday afternoon dread about gutters, a closer drive to your sister or your brother or family, fewer phone calls about a roof leak, a kitchen that you can actually cook in. Those are outcomes. Less stuff is a tool that you use to get them. So when you can't see the outcome, remember the vision? That's what we're talking about. You start treating the method like the goal. So you over declutter or you stall out for 4 years, just like the folks that wrote in today. Or you bring 90% of the stuff to the new place and you're still uncomfortable because the discomfort, it wasn't the stuff. The discomfort is from a life that you hadn't designed. Write the outcome first. One paragraph. The method follows that exercise. Let's get on with point number 5, and that is that you're going to downsize twice if you skip this next step. So you're going to downsize once, and if you do it without doing what I call the picture step, you're going to downsize again. And I'm going to use my aunt's story. So she went from a big house to a much smaller one. She got rid of probably half her stuff. 6 months later, though, we were doing it again. Not because she'd been lazy the first time. She'd worked harder than anyone I know on that first pass, just because I know her. She did it without a clear picture of what her new daily life was actually going to look like. So she brought the version of herself that she used to be into that house that didn't fit that version anymore. The things that she thought she'd need every day, she touched twice in 6 months. Round two was a lot more efficient, but she shouldn't have had to do it. And she wouldn't have had to if anyone, including me, had sat with her in advance and made her say out loud what normal looked like. It's the Tuesday morning test. So think about, what does a Tuesday morning look like in the new house? That's where you're able to actually see your motions, your flow, your functionality, and make sure you're not bringing things that are going to be unnecessary. Point number 6 is where the wealth side it comes in, and I promise this is short. So the transaction, it's going to cost more than you think. Yes, you're going to have commissions, you're going to have closing costs, repairs, staging, movers, deposits, new furniture that you didn't plan for, the storage unit that you swore you wouldn't rent that you absolutely will rent. None of it is a secret. It just adds up to a number that's higher than the back of the napkin math that you did 5 years ago. Here's where the missing piece, where it bites again. If you don't know what success looks like, you cannot decide whether the transaction is actually worth it, because the transaction is not worth it in a vacuum. It is worth it relative to a specific life that you are buying with the move. Without that life named, without envisioning it, the transaction is always going to look too expensive. Of course it will, right? Because numbers, they're hard to swallow. But if it's manageable, you have worked hard for the opportunity to make this an informed decision. Define the life, then run the numbers, and then make the decision. And if nothing else, at least you know that you were planning with purpose. Okay, point number 7. This goes back to what I said already. It's the Tuesday morning test. This is the one I'm going to explain it a little bit more. The whole thing, the grief, the spouse fights, the kid drama, the math, the timing, the 4-year January loop, every single one gets quieter when you can pass this test. And here it is. You and whoever is making this decision with you, sit down. You each write one paragraph. Not bullet points, a paragraph. It describes one specific Tuesday morning, exactly 1 year after you've moved. What does the room look like? What's outside the window? Who is in the next room? What's on the calendar that day? What's on the calendar this week? What conversation are you not having anymore? What conversations are you having for the first time? If you can both write that same paragraph without coaching, without compromise, without flinching, you are ready to start. If you can't, you are not ready. And you are not behind either. You are exactly where you should be. You are still in the picture step. And the picture step is the only one that's going to make you fail the rest of this process if you skip it. Run the test. That's it. That's the goal. Now, before I wrap, one last step. Not a checklist, just one. That Tuesday morning paragraph, 200 words, by yourself first. Tomorrow morning, before either of you talk yourself out of it, your spouse writes their paragraph. Then you read each other's. That's the entire assignment. If you can't get to 200 words, the picture isn't there yet. That vision is not there. And that's the most useful information that you're going to get out of this whole video. The picture is the missing piece, that vision. Everything else, it's going to flow and follow from it. Friends, if you've got a big transition coming up and you think you might need some help, let's talk. Book a free call. Link, it's in the description below. We'll send you a simple exercise beforehand so you can hit the ground running. And we'll figure out together what you actually need and who you need it from. Life is confusing and it's overwhelming. There's no substitute for someone who's been there and guides other people through it every single day. And that's what the call is for, if that helps you out. I'm Weldon Hobbs. When we're making big decisions, we start with your life goal, we optimize it for wealth, and then we focus on the real estate. Remember, good decisions, it starts with good information, and I'll see you in the next one.